Did you know a real estate contract could be contingent upon your dog? We're going to explore that and more on today's real estate podcast. Here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Elite Realty Group podcast, where we bring you the most up-to-date, relevant real estate information you're going to find anywhere on the planet. You're going to get it right here with us, and we are glad you have tuned in for today's episode, where we're going to be discussing the common contingencies that you sometimes see in a real estate contract. I'm Mike Elkins with Elite Realty Group. Got my partner Dave Elkins here to discuss these contingencies. How you doing today, my man?
I'm doing pretty good, Mike. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, ready to give this information out.
Did you say something about a dog?
I did say something about a dog. We're going to discuss that and much more about these real estate contingencies today, because I will say that I can't put this into a percentage, but it's going to be way less than 0.5% of contracts that we see come through here.
Yeah.
You see with zero contingencies. Mm-hmm. There are typically always contingencies on real estate contracts.
Yes.
Some of those are built in. Some of those are placed in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think once we explore this today and get into these contingencies, that's what we get asked all the time. Can I make it, can I put a requirement in here that this has to happen before I have to buy this house?
Yeah.
The answer to the question is yes.
Absolutely.
As long as the other party agrees.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to dive into today the most common ones. We're going to look first at the ones that's literally just, if you use the state approved contracts that we use here, provided to us by the state of Tennessee, these are actually already in the contract. You just have to say you're going to do them or not.
Yeah.
We highly recommend most of these. You do them, and we're going to discuss why. Then we're going to talk about the ones that you actually see people saying,
mm-hmm.
okay, I need to put this in here because I want this contingent. And then we're going to talk some about the ones that it's contingent upon your dog.
Yeah.
You can do that. So we're going to dive deep into the world of contingencies in a real estate podcast today, or in a real estate contract, I should say. We're glad you're listening to this podcast. So here we go. Let's first talk about what you would say proper definition
mm-hmm.
of a contingency. We talk about this stuff all the time because we're in real estate. We kind of know what a contingency is. But a lot of times you ask people, do you want any contingencies in your contract? And they're like, what is that?
What is that?
Yeah. What is that? Tell me more. So if you look at it and you say, what is the definition of a contingency? Well, it's a clause that, again, is pre-written in. You can write in. It can be done many different ways. But it's a clause in a purchase and sale that's specifying an action or requirement that must be met
mm-hmm.
before this contract becomes final, meaning it's executed, everybody agrees, and it is done.
Right.
So again, it's something that has to be met, a requirement, something has to be done that is specified in that contract for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look first at the ones that we see. These things here, they're pre-written. They're in there if you use this contract. I'll dive in first.
Okay.
The first one is, and I think it's one, again, we see this one a ton,
mm-hmm.
and it's literally financial contingencies. And I'm going to go financial contingencies, meaning on maybe the part of how you're going to pay for this.
Right.
And that can be two ways. You're going to pay for this in two different ways. It's going to be, you're going to be getting a loan, a mortgage to purchase this house. You've got FHA, you got USDA, you got rural development, you got VA, you got conventional. You got all kinds of different loan products, mortgages you're going to get. You literally specify it is contingent upon me getting this type. Very specific.
Right.
It's contingent upon me getting this type of mortgage financing for me to buy the house.
Yeah.
Now, it actually even goes deeper than that, because in these mortgage products, you've got conventional loans. Typically, you see those, they're around 20% down. So you're going to be able to get a loan for 80% of the value of this house. We're going to talk about that more.
Right.
You got 3.5% down. So if you get 3.5% down, I need 96.5% of this to be able to be financed.
Yeah.
But you literally specify in detail that I want this contract contingent upon me specifically being able to get this type of mortgage to buy the home. You also have, this is going to be a cash offer.
Right.
This is contingent upon me paying you cash. And people's like, you can still make it contingent at this point?
Yeah.
You sure can.
Absolutely.
Because where are you getting the cash?
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that sometimes when people say cash,
Right.
that's because they're getting out of a IRA, 401k, something like that. They just don't have it at their house, under their mattress.
Exactly.
They actually got to get it from somewhere, but
Right.
it will be cash once they get it.
Right.
So that is a very common contingency, that it has to be contingent upon me being able to get my hands on my cash.
Sure. That can not only be your cash, that could be I'm getting cash from my parents.
Yeah.
I'm getting cash from my uncle. But it is a contingency that you pre-write in there. Now, that has to be satisfied.
Yeah.
Now, with all of these contingencies that we talk about, we're going to talk about it's a contingency. But you also see along with that contingency typically comes a time frame.
Yeah.
Like, we're not just going to be able to say this and wait this thing out forever and ever and ever.
Forever, yeah.
You're going to see, we're going to be able to show you this, satisfy this in a particular point of time.
Yeah.
When you look at cash, it's actually written in a contract that you'll show proof of these funds.
Yeah.
That I'm getting this from this person, or I've got this in the bank, or I'm getting this from my 401k.
Right.
That's usually done within 5 days of the agreement going binding, meaning everybody agrees upon this. You see that.
Right.
With the loan, you see that is typically within 3 days you have to apply for this type of loan.
Right.
You're saying it's contingent upon me getting it, but you also turn right back around and say within 3 days I will go apply for this.
Yeah, then you got 14 days.
That's what I was going to go.
You got 14 days that you can say, okay, it is for sure we are a go here.
Yes, it's going to happen.
Yeah, again, we're talking about state of Tennessee contracts that could vary depending on what part of the state you're, or what part of the country you're in.
Depending on where you're watching and or listening to this podcast, that could be different. Now, I'm going to go back to that, though. Those are pre-written things in.
Yeah.
We're going a little bit maybe of contract writing here, but you can change that 5 days. Well, it's going to take me about 10 days to figure this cash one out. You can change that.
Yeah.
I may need a little bit more time on this 14 days. You could change that.
Yeah.
Those dates are just kind of pre-written in there that you do.
Right.
However, we see the majority of the time, those are the dates that stay. Those are the time frames
you
that
usually
stay the
stick
same.
to that. A lot of it, because again, as a seller, you don't want to give a infinite
No.
amount of time. You want to know, can these people buy my house or not?
Yeah, because it's going to be tied up
Yeah.
until that point of time, especially if you agree upon this.
Right.
So you kind of want it sooner than later.
Yes.
As a buyer, you want to make sure you got enough time to get all this stuff done,
Right.
because if you miss the contingencies, this is another thing I didn't think we would dive into, but we will. If you miss those dates on those contingencies, depending upon how it's written up,
Right.
that could be detrimental to you as a buyer.
Yeah.
Specifically when there's earnest money on the line.
Right.
You kind of got to do things and perform in that. So the first contingency that, again, we see on almost every contract we get, again, it's very, very, very rare we get contracts and there's no contingencies.
Right.
That you're always going to be dealing with them.
Yeah.
But the first one, talking about the financial contingency of this agreement, the loan or the cash and the time frame and the type of how you're going to get that, we see that
It's
often.
very common.
We see that often. Now, should you not be able to get your funds during those specified time frames, because now it is a contingency, you legally can remove yourself from the rest of this contract
Right.
because you had a contingency.
Right. That's the beauty of the contingency.
We tell people all the time, buyers and sellers, because this is a podcast that's going to be literally talking about both of them. Those contingencies are literally in there for protection for you.
Right.
You want to make sure you do have those
Yes.
built-in protections. You can put the contingencies in there and you got 14 days to get your loan. That don't mean you got to wait 14 days. As a matter of fact, you're not going to.
Right.
Time is of the essence. You want to move with some speed because we're trying to close this typically in 30 to 40 days.
Right.
You want to go sooner rather than later, but you do have those time frames and deadlines that kind of keeps all this going in the right direction.
Right.
So the first common contingency you see in a real estate contract is the financial one. Where's the cash? What about the mortgage? So on and so forth.
Right.
What do you got for another one?
So another big one is the appraisal contingency.
Right.
Okay. Because again, especially if we're financing this house, if we get a loan, if there's a loan involved, then there's going to be an appraisal contingency that goes along with that, because the bank wants to know that what they're getting ready to give money for is definitely worth that amount of money. So you're going to have an appraisal done.
Right.
So that is another very common pre-written in their contingency. So this gets missed a lot of times, though, when we come back to cash.
I'm with you.
Because, again, a lot of people don't realize that it's even an option for you to have an appraisal if you're paying cash. Well, that's on there too.
Sure.
So a lot of times it's just marked as they don't want no appraisal, but that's something that you definitely, if you're a cash buyer, if you're an agent, you're representing a cash buyer, you make sure that you're offering that, because that is on the contract.
Yeah.
It's a yes or no. Do you want it or not?
Right.
But you need to, again, if I'm paying cash, it's a good thing to know. Now, we've seen here the past few years, we've seen this, this appraisal contingency, even with a loan, that people have been paying, the difference.
Oh yeah,
because
they're wanting to waive it.
Yeah, they're wanting to waive that, so they're still having it, but it don't appraise for what the loan amount is. But the buyer is stepping up and paying that difference.
Exactly.
So that has kind of become, for a little bit, that
Something
was kind of the normal.
Yeah,
that was kind of the normal thing, because a lot of people selling their house making big chunks of money, and they was able to take that and pay the difference. But appraisal, again, whether that's cash, whether that's if you're getting a loan, for sure you're going to have that appraisal contingency.
No doubt. And I think people were putting those, waiving the appraisal contingency, because that's what they were doing. They were waiving them to try to make their offer look better, because they knew there was going to be 5, 10, 15 other offers on this property.
Right.
It's one of those things that we always try to make sure people understand. If you waive it, you've waived it.
Yeah.
If you're buying a $300,000 house and it comes back and appraises at $200,000, well, if that wasn't contingent upon it appraising, then you're right. You're paying that difference.
Yeah, I mean, and so do you worry about, you've heard this, that people have said, for the last little bit, people's been overpaying for houses. Well, if you waive that contingency, if you waive that appraisal contingency, you don't know. No. You don't know if you're overpaying for the house or not.
No.
So again, I highly recommend
that
you make it contingent upon an appraisal.
Yeah, and two things there I think you said is worth exploring more. One is waiving the appraisal. You can waive the appraisal, but still have the appraisal done.
Right, sure.
It's not contingent.
It don't matter.
It doesn't have to appraise for that.
Yeah.
But the second one I think that we need to dive into, kind of going along with that appraisal. So that's a contingency. Okay, I've got it checked. It's cash or financing. It doesn't matter. But I've checked I want an appraisal. And this contract is contingent upon that. What happens if it doesn't appraise?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that could happen.
Sure. What's common?
So what's common is the buyer at that point is going to tell the seller, "Hey, your house only appraised for, let's use $300,000. The house was listed at $325,000.
Right.
The house only appraised for $300,000. The buyer at that point is going to go back to the seller, and they're going to say, "Hey, Mr. Seller, house did not appraise. What can we do?"
Exactly.
So more than likely at that point, the seller now knows proof. We have proof from an appraiser. This is what your house is worth.
Right.
So I would say 90% of the time, that seller is going to reduce the price to that amount.
Right.
And then we'll move forward.
Sure. Yeah. And you look at that and you say, like you said, I got an appraisal. But I think the big point we need to get across here we're talking about common contingencies. That's a protection.
Absolutely.
That's a protection
Absolutely
for this buyer. So you'll a lot of times see that seller say, "Well, I mean, I'm not going to be able to sell it for no more than $300,000 anyway. I got an offer. These people are okay. Give me $300,000. I'll drop the price."
Right.
You also see that, going back to what you alluded to just a little bit ago, was, can the buyer just look at it and say, okay, it's only appraising for 300, they want 325, and you go to the seller and they're like, no, we're not going to drop the price.
Right.
Can the buyer pay the difference? Sure,
Yeah,
you
you can. Yeah.
That's decisions, though. The protection's in there for you. Had you never had that contingency, that none of this matters.
Right.
But because you have that, now you know.
Right.
You know that I am overpaying or I'm not overpaying.
Right.
You do see in today's time, the reason why we suggest do this, you do see sellers right now still living in a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And they're overpricing their houses.
Right.
And because inventory is low, you know, there's people that's saying, okay, I know it's a little high, but
Right.
I'm going to go with it.
Right.
The appraisal just kind of lets you know you got a protection, some sort of protection potentially on this investment that you're getting ready to make.
Right.
You want to make sure you got them in there.
And so you have this all the time where you get the buyers that ask you. So the seller has to, at that point, the seller has to drop to that price. The seller does not have to.
No.
Because again, we don't know the seller's situation. They might need that to pay off something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
Pay off the house. They might need that. So you don't know what that reason is for, but no, they do not. As the seller, you do not have to reduce to that price.
Exactly.
Now, again, if you can, by all means, you've got a real appraisal on file at this point.
Exactly.
So if you can, you would be smart to reduce that price.
No doubt. No doubt. So today we're talking to you about common contingencies that you find in a real estate contract. Again, the ones we're talking about here with you first, they're the ones that in the state of Tennessee, which is where we are with Elite Realty Group. These are in the contract already for you. You just have to elect whether you're going to use them or not. As always, we're probably going to suggest to you that you put these contingencies in. Should you not want to, we're also going to give you the information why you may not want to do that. So we've been through 2 so far. Let's look at the next one. So the next one, I think, is probably the one that is one of the biggest ones that probably people do know about, and that is inspections. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this purchase is contingent upon inspections.
Yes.
Now, we're going to leave that broad like that because inspections can include many things.
Many things.
Home inspection, you could say, okay, that's whole home.
Mm-hmm.
You could say HVAC inspections. You could say radon inspections. You could say pest inspections.
Foundation inspections. Septic inspections.
But under our contract in the state of Tennessee, you elect to have inspections.
Yes.
Not one particular.
Right.
So that literally keeps everything open for anything you could be concerned about for a buyer, someone purchasing this house, mm-hmm. that you may be concerned about. When you select, I'm going to have inspections,
right,
you're going to be covered under that umbrella of all of those things, unless you would change the verbiage of that, which we would not suggest that you do. Because again, you can always say, I'm good, let's go, versus these things. The same thing with the other contingencies we've talked about. The home inspection, there's going to be a time frame there. Mm-hmm. That for a seller, you're getting this offer with an inspection, a home inspection contingency. Well, you're going to know within 10 days, mm-hmm. they're going to, or they have to have all of these inspections done.
Right.
We've talked in other podcasts, we've talked in other shows, other things that we're a part of and that we do, that if you're buying a house, we're going to highly recommend you have a home inspection.
Yes.
You know, we're going to highly recommend this for the protection of everything that you do. That was a conversation we had in a whole other podcast. But a very common contingency that we see in a home inspection or in a contract is a home inspection. Now, talk to us just briefly about what happens. We get the home inspection done. We are not satisfied with this. It's contingent upon a satisfactory home inspection.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Just like the appraisal, the buyer is going to go to the seller. Okay. So if it's something that, is a concern to you, we can go back to the seller at this point and open up negotiations. Mm-hmm. We can say, hey, Mr. Seller, we need you to fix the following items that was found on the home inspection.
Sure.
We want you to reduce the price to cover us being able to do that.
Right.
You can escrow the money over at closing. That way you could take from the from your seller proceeds.
Yeah.
and pay for those repairs,
Right.
again, it just opens up negotiations at that point.
Right.
Has to be agreed upon by both of you.
Sure. Everybody's got to agree. If we're doing anything to amend this contract the way it's written,
Right.
well, then everybody's got to agree to that. So again, you see common is a home inspection.
Right.
That is a common inspection. That is a common contingency that we see. Give us another one.
Another contingency?
A contingency that you see.
Okay, I was going to talk a little bit more about this. So again, this is something as a we've talked about this on other podcasts, but again, that contingency, the inspection contingency, is one of the most missed time frame contingencies.
Oh yeah.
So again, make sure that you, as the buyer, are asking your agent, how long do we have to have these inspections? When is the date that we have to do all this stuff?
Sure.
Because you don't want to miss that contingency.
When you missed it, it's gone.
When you miss it, it's gone.
Yes.
There's no going back to it at that point.
And that goes back to that actually in the appraisal one. You know, the appraisal got to be done by this day. If you don't have it done by that day, you're essentially, it's pre-written anyways.
Right.
But you're just waiving it at that point. Inspections, you've got to this point to get them done. If you don't respond and say, hey, we want something done, you're saying I'm satisfied. So that's automatically done in these contracts. So you do dates and times. Time is of the essence in the whole entire contract. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to it and your agent's paying attention to it also.
For sure,
Go with the next one.
The next one is kind of, some people look at this as being a little bit silly one, but I don't personally think it is. But it's about being able to get a clear title.
Exactly.
So it is contingent.
Sure.
The whole place is content. The whole deal is contingent upon you being able to get a clear title for that house. What is that? That way, you know, when I'm purchasing this, that these people obviously have the right to sell this to me. That it's free and clear of any what we're looking for, judgments, liens, anything like that is against the house. It is coming to you with a clear, no doubt this is yours.
Right. And you look at that title, and it's more than people think that, because it is contingent upon that you do see problems with the title.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I got this property from my great grandpa, who got it from his great grandpa, and there ended up being descendants of one of those down through the line that they had rights to it also. But you know, we just kind of handed it down and did these things. And when title searches start happening, they find, hey, when this went from, you know, A to B, well, there was some people in here that had rights, but they never signed that this person could have it. Or, so you know what I'm saying? But nobody ever said anything about that. And it's not a problem. It's not those things. But making sure you got clear title for it, well, they're going to back up one thing and get all that fixed. You could potentially still go through with everything. You just want to make sure you coming in here as the third or fourth buyer or transfer of this title. And somebody back from great grandpa, from the great grandpa, the cousin down through the third generation pops up and says, I got a right to this property, and you got to do something. That's where you run into problems.
Yeah, you've seen it where people get themselves in a financial bind.
Sure.
And I've got a place, and I'm needing money, and I tell you, hey man, if you give me this right here, I'll you know, old handshake deal. We'll go down here to the courthouse, and I'll sign it over to you.
Exactly.
And that's what happens. And then now you're ready to sell it. And there's, you know, I've got you know, people that can come back and say, you know, hey, I didn't even know he sold this place. I actually have interest in it. I have rights, financial rights to that place. So that's another thing you can see. So it's, to me, it's a major thing. That you want to make sure that this place is free and clear when it's yours.
Yeah, and you have things also that are out there that will show up on this. You have a lot of people call them land contracts. A lot of people call them, you know, land deeds, whatever that it is, that, again, the person selling the property really ain't the owner of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's on a land contract from the person who actually owns it. Well, if that's the case, the person who actually owns it's got to be the person that you have it, not the person who's in the house. You also see, maybe it's our area, but I would say that it goes everywhere. Going back to those handshake agreements, you know what I mean? Or I'm going to trade you my old truck for
Mhm.
this 3 acres of property you got
Right.
over here. And we trade.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we just trade. Nothing's ever filed.
Right.
Nothing's ever done. I'm okay. You can do what you want to that property.
Yeah, it's yours.
And then, you know, the person who got the truck that gave you the property, they passed away. They had kids, but it was never officially put anywhere.
Right.
So you want to make sure that title is free and clear.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to pop up on here that you see happening, has happened right here in our area, happens all across the country, is the person selling the property is not the true owner of the property.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a scam.
Mhm.
It's somebody it's this or that, and that ain't the real owner of the property.
Yeah.
Title searches,
Find
those
out.
contingencies are going to 99.9% of the time
Yeah.
get that.
Yeah, it'll come to light then.
Yes. So those are what you would say common ones.
Mhm.
Those are actually the pre-written ones that we see that are in our contract. I think ones that you see though that are happen a lot that are not pre-written in there, something you've got to have your agent get in there for you. Probably the most common one that again is not pre-written is the buyer. This agreement is contingent upon the buyer
Mhm.
selling the house that they're in.
Right.
Okay, because they ain't going to have two places, so
Mhm.
they got to sell the house that they're in.
To buy this
Again,
one.
dates and times are going to come in with this, but it's contingent upon the buyer selling their property before closing of
Yes.
this new property. You do see that one
Very common.
quite often because we get asked all the time, do I buy or sell first? And that's going to be another show.
Mhm.
It really doesn't matter if you use contingencies in the proper way.
Right.
This agreement is contingent upon me selling my house before buying yours. On the flip side of that, what's the one that goes right along with that?
Which is one that again I think is overlooked a lot, but
Sure.
it's contingent upon the seller
Sure.
finding suitable housing.
Absolutely.
So now we've seen it be very specific
Mhm.
that the seller says, I will sell this house as long as I can buy this house.
Yes.
This one
Very
particular house.
specific.
So it can be that specific that
Mhm.
it has to be you're going to buy this house, and if I don't get that house, then I
Right.
don't want to sell my house.
Right.
Or it can be that I want to be able to find another house
Exactly.
that I like.
Exactly.
So that's again a lot of times a seller is afraid
Mhm.
to list their house because they say, I don't even know where I'd go.
Yeah, I don't know what would
I
happen.
don't even know what I would do.
Yeah.
I don't even know where I could go to.
Sure.
Well, you can list it and make it contingent upon you finding
That's right.
the house.
That you find that suitable housing
Yeah.
that you're wanting for yourself. Again, there's probably going to be a date involved with that.
For sure.
That way you get all that done. But there are a lot of people that we talk to, and they're honestly they're doing what you said. They're sitting on the sidelines right now. They want to sell their house.
Yeah.
And it's a good time to be putting your house on the
Sure
market
is.
across the country.
Yeah.
Nationwide, inventory is historically low. But these people are sitting on the sidelines because they don't know about these contingencies.
Yeah,
they
don't
don't
know.
know I can even do this.
Right.
So absolutely you can do this. Everybody's got to agree,
Mhm.
but it's something that again we're going to recommend to people that's selling their house. We're going to recommend you put this in here. Again, it's a protection for you.
Right.
It's something that you want.
Yeah. So many people think, well, I've got to sell my house and then I'm going to have to go live with somebody. I'm going to have to live in a camper. I'm going to have to do whatever.
They look at the worst case scenario
because they don't realize that's even a possibility.
Right.
That is a contingency for them.
Totally 100%. Understand that. Get that. No doubt about that. Hit that so that phone goes off. So those are common ones we see that ain't wrote in there.
Right.
When you look at ones, though, I'm going to throw this back to you because you wrote more contracts than me. What's some other ones? Maybe they're not the most common one, but we ain't went crazy yet.
Right.
But what's some that you see that you've seen in contracts before that it's contingent upon? Throw me some.
Big one is that you personally have to see the house.
I got you.
This blows people's minds sometimes, but a lot of people, man, that are moving to the area or whatever, they see the house, they know this is the one.
I love it.
They want to go ahead, write that offer. Let's get this thing, kind of under contract, but it's contingent upon me personally coming and walking through the house and liking it.
Exactly.
So that's a very common one.
Yes.
A very common one. Another one is that you want the approval of others.
Sure.
So what is that? Maybe the husband finds the house. The wife's got to work.
We just had this literally in a dual situation that what you're seeing. We had a person moving to our area.
Mm-hmm.
He was already here working. Wife was away.
Mm-hmm.
So he literally put both of those in there. It was contingent upon his wife approving the house, but coming and seeing it physically herself.
Right.
So you could do that.
Yeah. I mean, you can have a contingency for whatever you want a contingency to be for, but that's a very common. So again, a lot of times out of state folks are concerned. They don't even want to get real serious because, well, I'm 4 hours away. I'm 8 hours away. If it's one that you think you want, you can always make that offer. Make it again, dates, times that are always going to come back into play.
Right.
Here. So the seller's not going to give you a unlimited amount of time for you to come look at it. That's going to be something they're going to want you to do, relatively quickly.
Exactly.
But again, the sellers will work with you on that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if you find one and it's it, make it contingent upon you personally coming and seeing it.
Absolutely.
That's totally fine.
Absolutely. So on our way out the door, let's have a little fun. What's the craziest one you've ever saw part of a contract?
Crazy one.
And not that it's just way out there, but you'd say like, that's odd, but I've seen it.
I do remember one time that the buyer made it contingent upon, so the seller was a huge ZZ Top collector. And the buyer made it contingent upon the seller including all of the ZZ Top memorabilia that was downstairs.
That was already in the cave.
That did not work.
Right. So they didn't get it.
They asked.
Sure.
They did ask.
They were trying to.
Yeah.
The craziest one I've ever saw was we were selling a house up in Greene County near the airport. And the buyers wanted it contingent that the appropriate commission in Greene County, whether that be the airport commission, the county commission, the planning commission, whoever, give them a letter that they could fly their drones in the neighborhood that they were purchasing in. And they were big time, these like competitive drone people.
Oh yeah.
That, do competition. So they like flew drones all the time.
Yeah.
But there are rules about flying drones so close to an airport with a house near an airport. And so they wanted it contingent upon approval in a written form from those authorities that they could fly their drones in the area that they got. They ended up getting that.
Right.
So they were good to go with it. But that one was kind of one that you're like, I've never seen that before.
Right.
But it was a contingency. The seller agreed to it. Buyer agreed to it. Everybody went and got their letters. They provided it to them. No harm, no foul.
Again, they're contingencies. They have to be agreed upon. So back to your... I
was getting ready to go back to the dog.
At the very beginning, could it be contingent upon my dog?
Sure.
If you want to make it contingent upon your dog being satisfied with the fenced-in backyard,
you can do it.
You can ask for it.
You can ask for it.
Now, the seller don't necessarily have to agree to accept that contingency, but you can literally ask for whatever contingency you want.
Absolutely.
So if you got a question, I mean, those are questions, buyers or sellers.
Yes.
Have a conversation with a realtor.
Oh, absolutely.
Those are conversations you can have. Don't cost you nothing to have a conversation.
No.
If you've got questions like that, can you do this? Can you do that? Call up a realtor, man.
That's exactly
Be glad to explain those things to you.
Yes, absolutely. As always, if you're buying, selling, investing in real estate, no matter where throughout the country, we'd be glad to connect with you. Again, we have a network of realtors all across the country. And no matter where you are, we would be glad to serve you and help you in your real estate journey. This has been the common contingencies that you typically see in a real estate podcast provided to you today. This information by your friends at Elite Realty Group in Morristown, Tennessee. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe. Share it out on whatever channel that you are watching us on. We would greatly appreciate that. Be watching for more content coming from your friends here at Elite Realty Group. And until we see you next time, this has been the Elite Realty Group podcast. We hope you guys have a great and blessed day. We'll see you next time.